Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Channing Smith. I'm the rector here at All Saints. Welcome to All Saints. This is our 125th anniversary. And yes, you can give a, doesn't happen every once in a while. And so we've offered this speaking series in honor of that, and we are pleased to have Miroslav Volf with us today, and we feel 125 years is a significant moment to bring in a caliber of a speaker as such as Miroslav. Please know that Miroslav's talk, after his talk, we'll be gathered in our fellowship hall, which is just over here, for refreshments and a book signing. His newest book, released on May 20th, so very recently, is called The Cost of Ambition: How Striving to Be Better Than Others Makes Us Worse. And it's available at the reception, and Miroslav is happy to sign it. If we run out of books, there's a little index card. He's happy to sign that. You could use it as a bookmark or whatever you would like to do with that. Just a few more things about housekeeping. Restrooms, closest restrooms are right through that door, and take a left. We have also opened our parish house, which is the building right across the courtyard, for restrooms, and then at the reception there'll be restrooms in that building as well. I would ask that you please silence your cell phones so we are not distracted. This afternoon's session is being recorded, and it will appear on our website, so if you'd like to circulate the message that Miroslav has for us today, please feel free to do that. Lastly, tomorrow, Miroslav will be our preacher at our 8 and 10 o'clock services, so please join us for that. Just a little bit about our speaker this afternoon. Miroslav Volf is one of the world's most influential contemporary theologians and public intellectuals. Born in Croatia, Professor Volf serves as the Henry B. Wright Professor of Theology at Yale Divinity School, and is the founding director of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. His groundbreaking scholarship bridges theology, ethics, and public life. Professor Volf's work has been shaped by his experience growing up in the former Yugoslavia, bringing a unique perspective to questions of identity, difference, and peaceful coexistence in pluralistic societies. He's the author of numerous acclaimed books, including Exclusion and Embrace, and Allah, A Christian Response, which exemplifies his commitment to thoughtful Christian engagement with other faith traditions. As director of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, Professor Volf leads initiatives that explore how religious faith can contribute constructively to human flourishing in contemporary society. His scholarship and public engagement have made him a sought-after voice, in which we are pleased to have him, on issues ranging from religious freedom to economic justice, establishing him as a theologian whose work transcends academic boundaries to address pressing questions of our time. Please join me in welcoming Miroslav Volf.
So much. Thank you. First, all of you for coming. Saturdays aren't necessarily days that you want claimed. A lot of your lives are claimed, our lives are claimed. So it's an honor to me that you have come. And thank you so much for your kind words. I'm glad to be in Santa Barbara. It's been a while. Now, as I was driving, I was literally muttering under my breath as I was leaving LA at around 3 o'clock, and I was stuck in traffic, and the temperatures on the freeway were 106, you know, and so a little bit uncomfortable in some ways. But then as soon as the traffic cleared, and once I started coming close to Santa Barbara, and once the ocean appeared on the left, suddenly I thought, oh my goodness, this is an absolutely splendid thing to do, to come and revisit again Santa Barbara after so many years. Glad to be able to visit with my very good friend friends David and Judy here, and it's it's an honor to be here. So I will mainly speak here about my most recent ideas from my most recent book, which title you have heard, The Cost of Ambition, How Striving to Be Better Than Others makes us worse. It's important at the beginning immediately for me to say that I am concerned with striving to be better than others. I'm not simply troubled about striving. Striving is a good thing. Striving for, well, no, not period. Striving, period, is not a good thing. Striving for good things is a good thing. Striving for excellence is a wonderful thing. Striving to be better than others, or I use for that the word striving for superiority, seems to be an empty value. Now that will be very much contested, and that's why we will have a very interesting conversation, I hope, this afternoon here. Now, how did I come up to think about this idea? I am teaching at Yale a course entitled Life Worth Living. And the reason I'm teaching this course is because recently, as of recent years, I mean maybe even now, half a century, last 50 years, universities have stopped being places where one thinks about the character of the good life. We generally at universities now, almost all of them, we generally think about a very important question in our lives that can be put in very simple ways. How do I get from point A to point B? There are millions of points A and points B in our lives of various significance. Some are easy to get from one to the other. Others are very complicated and we need skills in order to be able to do so. And universities, as other also institutions, provide us help for that. But what universities tend not to ask these days is what B is worth getting to. And how do we assess which kind of goals are truly worth pursuing? As a result, I sometimes think we have become experts in means, but amateur, hapless when it comes to ends. We think we know what our ends should be, but especially in times of great change, as we are involved in now, it is really important for us to reflect about the character of our future, the aims which we should have, not which we have or which people around us have, and we make our own through some process of social osmosis, but aims that we actually should have. We have thought about them in a morally significant kinds of ways. Now, as I was teaching this class last maybe 12 years, the class has been taught, I had quite a bit of experience then with Yale undergraduates. Normally I'll teach in the divinity school, master's degree students. Now, as you know, Yale undergraduates they're some of the cream of the crop of undergraduates in this country, as a matter of fact, anywhere in the world, right? Our great universities require our applicants to be exceptional. Most of them are somewhere at the top of their class in their high schools. They're cream of the crop. They come to Yale, though, and they are, each one of them, at the top in their high school, is one of the 5,000 equally gifted students. And for many of them, this is disorienting experience. And it's disorienting experience because they have drawn their value from the fact of being, let me use now that term, superior. Superior performers. And now suddenly that differential of being better than others has been taken away from them. And for many of them, that presents a problem. And it is not an accident that in many of our great institutions of higher learning, students experience a great deal of psychological pain and trauma. There's a sense of inferiority that creeps up among students that are, on the whole, in objective terms, actually superior and excellent at what they do. So much so that rates of depression are surprisingly high among students. And depression is a malady of inadequacy. Why is it, I have then asked myself, that such extraordinarily gifted students feel themselves to be inadequate? And I think that the response is because they compare themselves with others and draw the sense of adequacy or sense of value from comparison, from being better in comparison with others. And that got me thinking about the whole experience, educational experience. And sometimes I've then told students, you know, you feel you come into a seminar and you feel uncertain. You don't know whether what you're going to say is smart, and somebody next to you has read more books than you, has accomplished more than you, and you feel uncertain, inadequate. And I told them, every single professor, by the way, feels exactly like that. You sit in a circle of professors. Everybody has read those books that I haven't read. My goodness, and you draw your mental lists of books and things that you have to do that others have done and accomplished, and you go away from a meeting, you feel inadequate. Oh my goodness. And a little bit of imposter syndrome is there. You're familiar with that because it isn't just true in educational institutions. It is true across the life in all domains of life. And so I started thinking about this question. It's a puzzle. Why this sense of inferiority? And as I will try to say a little bit later, I think that striving for superiority inferiorizes. Striving for superiority inferiorizes. And I'll return back to explain more in depth what I mean by that. Now, of course, this issue of striving for superiority and the problems associated with it is not new. It's only in a sense that it's so incredibly widespread today. From cradle to grave, we strive to be superior. In all domains, education, in politics, economics, arts, sports. Of course, sports is paradigmatic of the type of striving for superiority. And it's prevalent today, but it has been with us for centuries, for millennia. As long as humanity existed, in a sense, we have striven also to be superior. In the biblical traditions, you have it recorded very early on in the book of Genesis, in the story of Cain and Abel. Why has been the first murder recorded in the Bible committed? Because the one who thought of himself as superior has been rendered less than superior, has been rendered inferior by the judgment of an indisputable judge, which is to say God. God accepted the Abel's sacrifice, but not Cain's, and there we go. The tables have been turned, and suddenly the reason of this kind of sense of diminishment in value creates desire to have the competitor pushed out of my life. And so it was, if you, in the book I discuss John Milton and John Milton's wrestling with that problem. He basically thinks that that's at the heart of the temptation of Eve. Eve was feeling herself inferior to Adam because that's how relationship seems to have been. She's coming from Adam, not Adam from her, and then seeks with the help of that knowledge that she will get to gain superiority, upper hand over Adam. Some of you have read those texts in Genesis very carefully. You might not agree with Milton. But nonetheless, Milton saw it there. And if you want to read more, I have a whole chapter about Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. And I think it's in these two, one of the greatest pieces of literature in English language, they play a very significant role. And Milton, most famously, takes it all the way to the very beginning, to the war in heaven, where Satan feels that he has been created by God, although second to God, but as created, he owes the debt of gratitude to God, and owing a debt of gratitude means that he is inferior to God. It means that he's received existence from God, and he can't stand it. Trouble for him is, right, that he is second. In Olympic Games, the worst place to be is to be second. Third is great, right? Oh, I just made it. I'm sitting on this podium. First is, of course, fantastic, but second? How could I have missed it? I deserve it, or whatever that might be going on through the heads of people. And that was his problem, Satan's, right? He's second. One step, he says exactly in those words, one step higher would make me the highest, and yet I'm not. Right? And so you have this, again, sense of incredibly highly placed person who is wrecked by self-loathing that he's not at the very top. So he's seeking for superiority. And you, from these examples that I give you, you might think, well, maybe that's the malady of only the strong, those who are actually superior and who compete. And yet, that's not the case. That superiority is not just in all domains of life, it is also at any stage that you find yourself in that scale of value. I think one of the most powerful examples that we see of that is in the first novel that Toni Morrison wrote, The Bluest Eye. That poor little African-American girl, Pecola, wants to have the blue eyes as the movie stars that are receiving such accolades have. And that there are tragic consequences of this desire to have a different kind of eyes. This is an extreme case there, but less extreme cases are also very much with us. Now, when we speak today about this question, a lot of us feel, and when I speak to people on these issues, you can sense the people nod as you have as I speak about this. You nod your heads, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Not only a phenomenon, but also the phenomenon that how troubling it is. And so you might ask yourself, well, why is it that we simply feel uncomfortable and accept this? As if this was what? Given by our nature? And that might be an argument that we can make. To be a human is to strive to be better than your neighbor, maybe. It looks like it is as widespread as any humans are. It applies to each individual, in a sense, person. Other people say, but in society in which we inhabit, this is actually the price of progress. It's not just that it's kind of a feature of humanity, of who we are. It is also, partly because it's a feature of our humanity, it is also the way in which we can improve ourselves. All the advances, you might argue, just as in sports, because there is competition, people strive advances are made. In school, sometimes when I was a student, competition was encouraged because, of course, then you're going to excel. And so it is in just about all domains of life, so that then people might say, well, I know there's something uncomfortable about it, but it's the price of progress that we pay. So one of the first time when I talked about this question, before I started writing the book on it, I was invited once to give a talk at a kind of global congress on Christians in sports. And so I thought, well, what am I going to say to these people? You know, I like sports, but I don't know too much about sports. I don't have any particular wisdom to give them. And then I thought, well, let me try to talk about striving for superiority. And my basic argument was this. We all know what is the reputational and what is monetary value of successful striving for superiority. My example there, where I come from, and I come from Europe, was a soccer player, Lionel Messi, who was at that time highest paid athlete in the world, and the name that everybody on the planet knew, whether that's in the rich and wealthy countries or anywhere in South Africa, anywhere in South America, anywhere in Africa as well. Every little kid had a jersey with Lionel Messi written on it, right? So clearly, the advantage, or monetary advantage, and reputational advantage is immense of successful striving for superiority. My question for them is, what is the moral value of striving for superiority? And just like with you here too, there's a silence when one asked this question. So it was there too. An uncomfortable silence, especially there, because they were all in the business of enhancing performance. But I think it's worth for us exploring this question. And especially, I think we can explore it without necessarily compromising striving for excellence. And if we make this distinction, striving for excellence as distinct from striving for superiority, maybe we can find our way through that maze. There are in many domains, for instance, economy is one where people often say, well, you've got to strive for superiority. I don't think Warren Buffett thinks that. And some of you who know more about him than I do, I think will agree with me that he's actually pushing against striving for superiority, and he thinks that it's much better if we strive for excellence in the fields in which we are actually excellent, and move in that direction, every day being better than you have been yesterday. And that's really the recipe, as he sees it, recipe of success. My question was, what's the moral value of striving for superiority? Different way to ask that question is, what are the damages that striving for superiority inflicts on us? Well, since if we are striving for superiority, there's always somebody above us, and there's just about always somebody below us. We're somewhere always in the middle. Right? We're striving for superiority, and by striving for superiority, we in fact make the other person inferior. I'll give you an example from domestic sphere. Say you drive a nice little car, like I do, Honda Fit. I like my Honda Fit. It drives well. Never have to take it to a shop to be repaired. Reliable. It's a great little car. I drive it I drive it to my work, and it's great. My neighbor gets Audi 3. It's not much larger car, but it's much nicer car. And suddenly, what was a really nice car for me becomes a car that I'm uncomfortable with. I walk and I see Audi 3, I see my Honda Fit, and I feel inadequate. And not only did I feel inadequate here, I feel that my little car has lost in value, which is kind of idiotic thing, which it absolutely has not. It has exactly the same value that has had. Its relative standing is lower than the comparand, but hasn't lost the value. And yet I relate to it as if it is less valuable. The same applies also when we compete others as individuals. I can improve, and if somebody has improved more than I have improved, I feel worse about myself having improved if somebody has improved more, because I'm deriving the entirety of my value from comparison with others. I'm striving to be better than others rather than striving simply to be excellent. There is a very beautiful story that Søren Kierkegaard, I should say Søren Kierkegaard, that's how we pronounce it here, right? Not this Danish pronunciation. How would they know how to pronounce the name in their own language? In one of his writings, he comments on the Sermon on the Mount and on the passage in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus speaks about worry and then uses as an example lilies in the field and birds in the air. Lilies in the field, they don't worry. They don't toil. And yet the Father in heaven clothes them, and they're more beautiful than Solomon in all Solomon's glory. Little field lily, more beautiful than the greatest of Israelite kings in all his glory. Now Kierkegaard reflects on this and he says, well, there was birds were mentioned too by Jesus. There was this little bird also who was flying around and befriended this little lily. And they started conversing and chatting, and the bird was so much more knowledgeable because the bird has traveled around, seen the world, and the bird starts talking to this little lily what the bird has seen. As it turns out, the bird was naughty. And then he starts talking to the little bird, the little lily, about other lilies that it has seen. There were these crown imperial lilies that were absolutely gorgeous. And every time after the conversation that the bird and the lily had, when the bird left, Lily felt worse about herself. So much so that at one point they decided the wise thing to do would be for the bird to peck around the little lily and uproot it carefully and then carry it to where those gorgeous lilies are, so that she somehow had at least some reflected glory and become a little bit like them. And the moral of the story is, as you know, what happened. It wilted in the process of trying to be one of those crown imperial lilies. Now, in the same text, Kierkegaard suggests also a kind of solution to this problem. And he sees the solution to the problem in this comment that the lily, as it was created by God, was more beautiful than Solomon in all his glory. Now, Kierkegaard thinks then this way. Now, if little lily is more beautiful, mere flower is more beautiful than Solomon in all his glory. It means that any human, as mere human, would be more beautiful and have more valuable than Solomon in all his glory. His conclusion is Solomon, as a human, stripped of all his glory, is more glorious than Solomon with all the kingly royal splendor that surrounds him. Which is to say, human being qua human being. Mere fact that we exist, that we are as unique individuals, gives us greater value than anything that we can do can give us. Put differently, the key is to distinguish between who we are as humans, or you can put it like this, our mere existence, the fact that we are, from achievements that we have made. And to say, my value, most fundamental value, lies in my mere humanity. Now, that's not always easy to do, right? Because we tend to compare ourselves, and that's why comparisons with a view of establishing value are so deeply problematic. As it happened, when I was, just before coming here, I was watching one of the episodes on Netflix of the show called Black Mirror. I don't know if any of you have seen that show. And it's an episode called Nosedive. And it goes something like this, that in this technologically very advanced society, and the whole Black Mirror is impact of technology on how we live as individuals and in social settings. It generally tends to be dystopian. But something like this goes. So everywhere you go, you have something like a phone, and then you, in all the encounters, you can see kind of the rating of each person rank, right? And then every interaction, you can rank them, and that has then implications of how they're standing, and next time when other people see them, they see them as ranked. So that your rank is constantly going up and down, depending on all of your encounters, right? And you think, well, this is kind of bizarre. But on the other hand, when you think about it, minus the phone, it almost seems like that's how we live our lives. All different encounters, a little bit of gossip here or there, and you form the image of them. You form image of yourself. You kind of rank yourself, and then there's also if you are ranked very high, if you're not ranked high enough, you cannot buy certain properties. You have to be 4.8 at least in order to get to those properties, and so it goes. In all the interactions, you are ranked according to how you score in comparison to other people. And of course, the point of the show is that it becomes a kind of a disaster. The entirety of who we are as selves has been shaped and formed by the position we have relative to others. And Kierkegaard's point, and I think the point, and this is where I'm going to end, the point of Apostle Paul, on whose thought Kierkegaard relies quite a bit as well as on Jesus, is that this is a very wrong way to do things. In 1 Corinthians, one of the epistles that Apostle Paul writes, he is involved in a kind of struggle with the Corinthians. And the struggle that he has with Corinthians is they think that he is inferior because they need somebody who would boost their status and superiority, because Apostle Paul is proclaiming foolishness of the cross and weakness of the cross, and they're really interested in power and in wisdom. And so Christ crucified is uncomfortable. They like resurrected Christ, but not Christ crucified. And so there's this tug of war that's going on. Apostle Paul thinks they're betraying the gospel, and they think, what use is a God to me if the God won't up my social ranking? That any good God should do just that. And then Apostle Paul, at one point in chapter 4, he kind of raises this question. He has 3 rhetorical questions. And it's against the backdrop of asking them, why do you think that you're special? Because that's what Corinthians thought of themselves, this group, or that you should be special, right? And I think implied response is, well, I really work hard. I'm really putting a great deal of effort in this thing. Of course, God is helping me, but God helps those who help themselves. Therefore, God helps me because I'm helping myself. So this whole thing that I am, in fact, I can ascribe to myself and to my efforts. I'm somebody because I've made myself to be somebody with God's help, right? And then Paul asks, but what do you have that you have not received? And he thinks that the answer should be, I don't have anything. Why does he think that? Well, he thinks that because you have been created by God. Your entire existence rests on God. God's creative power are given to you, not earned by you. All your powers that you have are being given to you so that whatever you use as powers has been given to you. What you have is all a gift. And Apostle Paul then says, if it is a gift, why do you boast? Why do you think, even if you don't say it out loud, boasting toward others, why do you boast in your head and say, I am better than that other person? Now, you might say some of you may sit here and say, that it's not quite right. It's not quite right that absolutely everything that I have has been given to me. We can debate this question. It's a significant controversy within Christian theology and Christian history, whether how do we understand this question. But let me grant the point of those of you who are objecting. Let's grant the point that you also, that I, contributed significant something. Now, when I ask myself the question, okay, so Miroslav, you teach at Yale. It's kind of achievement, right? So how much have you contributed to teaching at Yale? You, Miroslav, how much have you contributed? So if I'm honest and think about it, I might say 3%? 4? Something like that. Would seem to me like a right kind of answer. After all, I haven't given existence to myself. None of the genetic makeup that I have, I've earned at all. It's not my doing at all. Which means my capacities, intellectual capacities, my ability to be patient, to study, discipline. I can trace it. I see my mother, my father, and I said, this goes from here, this goes from there, and so on, right? Well, and then there was this setting in which I was, social setting, that contributed. I think of my nanny, who's this angel of my life. How much of my comfort with myself that makes it possible for me to work rests on this beautiful woman who was 5'6", babushka, wrinkled, had a mustache, had a wart. Beautiful, beautiful, absolutely beautiful human being. Because the inside was just gold. It's extraordinary. How much did it? Then I asked myself also, when I was 1, my brother, who was 4 years older than I was killed in an accident. How much of love that my mother has had for her children has not been diverted now from this boy who was killed toward me, as opposed to, as distinct from my sister. Well, there's some of it too. And then I feel I've benefited from the death of this poor child. And so I can go all along. If had I not met my brother-in-law, who knows what would have happened with me. Accidental kinds of things, because he inflamed the love of learning in me. And I can go on. And I can say, and so my assessment is 4% to me. The problem is, if you then ask me, well, can you draw the line? Which 4 is yours? And how do you, then I say, sorry, I can't. I have no idea how to slice this. I don't know what I have achieved, what is attributable, what can be properly attributed to me, so that I can, without any sense of unease, say, yeah, Miroslav, this is pretty good what you've done there. But if that is true, not just if Paul's claim, nothing that you have is yours, it was given to you. If my second account is true, then any kind of superiority claims in comparisons with others must be out of the window. And instead of loving myself, affirming myself on account of my achievements comparable with others, I simply come to the point that I affirm myself as an individual, as a human being, that I am, as Kierkegaard has said, more valuable as a human being than I am in any successes, on account of any successes that I might have had. In other words, this is a kind of unconditional love, which we are loved not on account of anything we have done or failed, or love was diminished on account of failing to do anything, but simply on account of who we are. That kind of love is at the foundation of my existence. Now the story of creation, and then I end my comments. I thought I would speak much shorter than I did, so my apologies. God creates the world in Genesis. At the end of creating everything, there is an exclamation. That's in Genesis 1:31, I think. God exclaims, "And look, it was very good." It's interesting. And look, who's God talking when God says, "and look"? I think he's talking to you and me. This is a literary device to draw our attention to the act of God's praise of creation. And then you ask yourself, well, what was the good about? Good in what sense? Is it functionally good? Hasn't functioned yet. Is it aesthetically good? Perhaps, yes. Is it in terms of utility somehow good, serves some good purpose? It's not clear. I think that it is good in existential sense, meaning the sheer existence of what God created is the good and has then other goods that are attached to it. And I think this happens when this is God's reaction, is like a reaction of every good parent when the child is born. We don't know what the character of the child is when the child is born. We don't know exactly how it's going to look, and they don't look particularly nice. It takes a while. They're ours. That's what we know, right? But then you witness maybe birth of a child. There are tears that express kind of joy that is muted, doesn't know even how to express the joy that is there in witnessing this and receiving this incredible gift. And they say, it's so good that you are, right? Just the fact that you have arrived is such a joy. I think that's what God said when God created the world. It is so good that the world is. It is so good that each of us is, and there is nothing that can increase that goodness or decrease it. It exists by the sheer fact of our existence. Now, to me, that is one of the most beautiful things that can be said about us, and most liberating thing that we can internalize and live out at any point in any setting of our lives. Thank you very much.
When Miroslav and I were getting to know each other before we started, he said, what I really look forward to is the question and answer time right after what I say. So I'm hoping you might have a question or two that you might want to raise. And as you're thinking about that, I have a question for you. Was just thinking about the phenomenological experience of receiving versus like proving. And I remembered it was triggered. I mean, so many things have gone through my head as I've listened to you. But there's a debate in one of Paul's letters is whether we are, quote, saved by the faith of Christ or faith in Christ. Mm-hmm. And if I sit with that in my gut, the faith of Christ feels much more like a gift. Yeah. And I'm just wondering about the practice of receiving or seeing life as a gift or something. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think this is really, really important because it is the fact that for Christians, those of you who are Christians, from the Christian standpoint, it is the fact that our existence has been given to us. Now, the crucial question is whether I recognize it as such, whether I receive it as such. And this idea of needing to receive the gift properly. I think personally that reception of gifts is the key to, in many ways, to a kind of successful life. I mean, successful in a more human sense rather than in a successful sense in any of the standard ways in which we measure successes. Because recognizing myself, receiving the gift of my existence would be through act of gratitude. What gift it requires is gratitude. ability to, that's true in case of forgiveness, which requires also repentance, seeing that I am the one who has done wrong and I'm receiving the forgiveness. But in other ways, it requires simply gratitude. And gratitude is not a return of anything to the other person. Gratitude is recognizing that I don't have to return anything, that this has been given purely as a gift to me. It has implication for me in a sense that I then recognize myself as not as a fortunate simply person who has, like, say if I find something on the street and I think, wow, I'm a lucky person, I found it, right? But in the case of gift, you're not lucky that you have, it's somebody has intended to give you something as a gift. This is much more, you are loved, not lucky. And that makes the entirety of the difference. Faithfulness of Christ is the faithfulness that comes to my good as a gift from Christ. And in that sense, whatever role the faith is, it's preceded by this faithfulness of Christ. Yeah.
Barbara, you had it.
Thank you so much. I kept thinking of one of our basic teachings, which is love your neighbor as yourself, which is the great equalizer, I think, loving everyone being equal and not forgetting yourself as well. Yeah. And then I was also thinking about what you just said about the attitude of gratitude. Is I'm grateful to have any house, any car, myself, a roof over my head, food, and all that stuff. So it's not really a question, but a comment that you might want to respond to.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think you have also noted that loving neighbors as myself isn't not loving myself. Kierkegaard has a line which goes, I hope I can, it's a little bit twister of the, in the rhetoric and thinking, I hope I can remember it. You should love yourself the way you love your neighbor when you love him as yourself. Love yourself the way you love your neighbor when you love the neighbor as yourself, right? And so that's what you said was equalizing. That's kind of gives equal status to you and to neighbor without forgetting you in that. So it's not, in this sense, self-sacrificial. It is self-decentering. I'm not at the center of my world, simply. I am one of the nodes, equally valuable nodes in a network of relationships.
If my son were here, he would be saying, gosh, that sounds great, Dad. You got a big smile on your face. What about Lucifer? The evil one.
Well, so let me try to defend a little bit Milton. and however, whether you think that Lucifer exists as a concrete person, I have no idea. There are people who say, you know, somebody who is evil as Satan, it really can, to that one you can't ascribe personhood. But however one thinks of this, we don't need to go into this. But it would seem to me that his tragedy, and I want to speak about it as tragedy, lies in the conception of the gift and the need for gratitude as an insult to pride. That is to say, see, if I have been given something and therefore gratitude is appropriate to somebody, for that very reason, that somebody is higher than I am. The gift giver is higher than the gift recipient, especially if what you're given is the existence. And then gratitude seems like a duty of recognition of somebody as my superior. But I think that's to misconstrue what gift truly is and what is the appropriate response to a gift. Not, I need to make up for this, but simply expression of gratitude. In one of the cartoons in New Yorker, way back when, maybe 30 years ago or something like that, I saw there's a couple came to visit for dinner at another couple's place. And so they're leaving, and then the husband says, since we are not into payback dinners, would $50 be... So what was supposed to be a gift, and then if there is reciprocation, it is a free reciprocation with another gift, turned into some kind of implicit contract and sense of obligation beyond the gratitude. And Satan knows, this is really interesting in Milton. I analyzed that portion of Milton's Paradise Lost. By the way, that portion, this soliloquy of Satan, when he has fallen and now he thinks why that happened. Milton wrote that before he wrote anything else in Paradise Lost. That's kind of organizes the whole of the poem in many ways. And so he knows, Satan knows, that he doesn't need to return anything to God. He needs to simply recognize the gift that he has received, and still cannot do it. Because his pride would not let him. And then you have this oscillation between pride that wants to lift itself up and self-loathing that kind of always results out of this inability. And between pride and self-loathing is, I think that's where strivers for superiority live. They live between the pride and self-loathing. The middle is not available to them.
The self-loathing is the drug that when it kicks in, the contempt for more pride.
It's the pain that seeks to be healed by or it's obverse of the pride, right? Which seeks to be healed by striving to be superior. And so two psychological states oscillate and drive the striving for superiority. And both are really unhealthy psychological states.
Thank you, Professor.
Am I? Okay.
This is thought-provoking talk, and I'm very thankful for it. It prompted two questions. One is, I wonder whether the bulk of what you said is very culture-specific. I was born in Sri Lanka, which is a combination of Theravada Buddhism, Hinduism, and so on. And I was raised up a Catholic. In that country, foreigners cannot own property. So I held a property for an American friend of mine, which I recently sold to another person. And when I did a Wikipedia review, I found out that he was a Tamil refugee who was fled the country during the brutal interracial warfare in the 1980s. He went to Norway as a cleaner, and now he donates $650 million to a charity. Now, I believe that ambition is something which is needed in my part of the world because of the distortions of this concept of karma, that you are, fated to be where you are. And unfortunately for my Buddhist friends, they suppress the desire because the Buddha says that all
Sure.
failings come from desire, but it erupts into a terrible type of jealousy. So if there is a level playing field where people are ambitious and strive to get better than others, I think that is probably an evolutionary mechanism, which is a good thing. That's my first point. The second point I want to make is that I was under the impression that your talk could be confined to material possessions. And in other words, keeping up with the Jones paradigm, the cars and so on. But your predecessor, Reverend Sloan Coffin, he led some brilliant civil rights movements. And in a very toxic world, is it anything wrong striving to be better than others in a moral sense? Because, I mean, as a former Catholic, I see our cardinals and so on just being quiet when the genocide in Gaza is being live streamed. I mean, we have to get our morals from the founder of Ben and Jerry's, or the Khan's TikTok people, or Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times. So I think in a time of moral ambiguity, people striving to be better than others, in that band, in that very narrow band of being good to people and being good to your neighbor and being appalled by cruelty, is not a bad thing.
Thank you for the question. Let's take this last point that you made. So first, striving to be better is, from my perspective, a good thing, provided one strives for it to be better in a good that is good, rather than in something that isn't, right? So moral striving for improvement, that seems to me given. It's given in all the biblical texts. So I wouldn't want to push against it. To the contrary, I would want to push in favor of it, sturdily in favor of it. And this is now a slight digression, but I'll return to main question that you're asking. In fact, I think that we have a problem, in part, because we live increasingly in the world that doesn't have sturdy moral commitments so that we can assess somebody on the basis of something objective, but rather all our assessment of others are subjective based on their variety of their performances. And once you do that, then you're outside of the moral field, outside of the stable values, and things become really problematic psychologically and in other ways, I think, as well. And that's why I think the problem of striving for superiority is so keenly felt. There's a book called Weariness of the Self, written by a person called Ehrenberg, author, and it is a cultural history of depression. Cultural history of depression. And the question that is being asked is, why has depression become signature psychological malady late 20th century, beginning of 21st century, whereas in the beginning of the 20th century, it wasn't. There was neurosis, other things were kind of maladies that we had. And he says, depression is malady of inadequacy, of feeling of inadequacy. And the reason why we feel inadequate is that we see ourselves as autonomous individuals and that there are no objective standards by which we are measured. And if there are no objective standards, then you cannot simply say, oh, this is good. I made the progress. Okay, let me make another step, and I'm going to make progress in something that's valuable. Value is defined. Goalposts are moving constantly, and value is defined by striving itself. And that makes it so problematic, I think, in our sense, the striving. So in terms of Buddhism, I know desire is the problem in a Buddhist tradition. I think wrong desire is a problem. In a Christian tradition, desire itself is not a problem. Desire is a good thing, and so it's quite different than in the Buddhist tradition. The other part, your friend, who on account of ambition has acquired wealth and given, Ambition is also not bad. It has costs, some costs, a certain kind of ambition, but I wouldn't say it's bad. It's a good thing that we are striving. It's a good thing that scientists are exploring and finding solutions to a variety of problems that beset us. It can be used in negative ways, but it's on the whole a very good thing. Now, I have forgotten your second part of the question. Second part of the question was, maybe you can, Channing, you can summarize it, if you know.
No, I think Austin can summarize it.
Well, the second part of the question.
Just quickly, I'll if you jog my memory, I'll remember it.
I mentioned the Reverend Sloan Coffin as
yeah.
a role model.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, this is great, great role model. I have only a kind of quietism, a kind of sense that things simply should be as they are, I think is a big problem. It's a big problem individually when we think of it this way, but it's a big problem socially. In that sense, I think we need social engagement. We need it in varieties of domains. And again, I hope that nothing what I said would push against that. To the contrary, what I want is for us to forget about competitive striving, who's better, who's worse, and ask the question, what is the right thing to do? Roll up the sleeves and do that work, and do it with gusto and with full force. Not looking at how I am assessed in doing this by others and how I have come to stack with regard to others, but looking at the good that I am called to perform.
I have an alternative story to Milton's story about Lucifer, and it comes from the Jewish Midrash, and it's an entirely different take on it, and I always found it very interesting. Satan, well, he wasn't called Satan until we get halfway through the Old Testament.
Yep.
Anyway, Lucifer, whoever he was, the bearer of the light, loved God so much, and when God made man, he told the angels, you are now to serve man. And Lucifer was so unhappy about this because he loved God so much that he only wanted to serve God. So he led a rebellion of angels, like-minded angels, who knows how many and what their names were, but anyway, he wasn't the only one that fell. And that's their take on it anyway, and I find it interesting that it was Satan's love for God that caused his hatred, supposedly, for mankind. His desire to get in there and and ruin the whole plan.
I'm not necessarily interested in or might not be profitable to try to understand psychology of Satan. I have invoked Milton only to illustrate the way in which a notion of striving for superiority may function. I don't want to contest this in any sense. It's very interesting what you're saying, because I'm a big fan of Friedrich Nietzsche. I've read him all of my life and a great admirer and fierce critic of him. But at one point in Das book, Zarathustra, he speaks about Zarathustra at the point when Zarathustra comes and brings the wisdom to humanity. He encounters a saint. And that saint says to Zarathustra, Zarathustra says to him, I love humans. And so he's bringing the gifts of his wisdom to humans. I love humans. And then the saint says, I love God. I don't love humans. And that's why he's ran away into the desert, so that he can be with God, and humans are not worthy in a sense of being loved. So there's a kind of Nietzsche's read of almost entirety of the ascetic tradition. That's what he's suggesting. The entirety of the ascetic tradition in the Christian faith that is directed toward God is actually diverting love that should go to humanity to God. So Jewish Lucifer and Nietzsche's saint are parallel figures.
That makes us feel better living here in Santa Barbara, not in the desert.
Well, I was listening to you and thinking, okay, we've been given this gift, these gifts that we should receive and be grateful. I feel okay about that. And immediately what comes up for me is responsibility. I've been given these gifts, and now I have a responsibility. I think you were talking about that when you were talking about rolling up our sleeves. Yeah. Anyway, that's my question. Where is that the feeling of responsibility is, I don't want to say wrong, but am I not being then grateful by feeling responsible for the gifts I've received?
No, I certainly, yes. My theory of the gifts as Christians, my theory of the gifts is that some gifts are given that we receive are for us. Most of them are to be passed on. It doesn't mean that everything you have is a gift for you. It means that it's a gift for you to give to others. And in that sense, we become participants in the gifts that flow from God to each other, so that each other are recipients of God's gifts, and we are instruments then of passing on those gifts.
It reminds me of Lewis Hyde. He opens his book called The Gift. It just simply says, what is good is given back. What you value as good is passed along, like you were saying. Yep.
Channy, thank you, Dr. Volf. Are there any international conferences of theologians that are planned that can address some of the issues? And getting over triumphalism, I'm not sure that Orthodox, whether it's Orthodox Judaism, some of those who feel that their faith, that their beliefs are superior to everybody else's, if they're the ones that comes to these conferences, probably not. But I would love to see an interfaith global kind of conference, whether it's held in Europe, I'm sure they've done that in the past, where you can speak out in a way that is going to make it to the public of all countries. I mean, I think there needs to be a loud voice. And is there anything that you can think of that's happening or should happen?
Well, I can think of a lot of things that should happen. I don't see right now much happening on the kind of interfaith front. Like 20 years ago, interfaith about 20 years ago, interfaith issues was at the forefront. Nation states, this was in the wake of nation states being seen as a disappointment because they couldn't quite deliver in the world, especially in Africa, in other places, couldn't deliver what they promised that they would. And then some people explained resurgence of attachment to religious traditions and their political significance to that failure of nation states. Now we are in an opposite point of the cycle, where nation states have become dominant factor in the world politics, and that not just with some of what we earlier called failed, struggling states, but in the states like this country, or like China, or like India, or like Russia, the European states where nation state and certain forms of nationalism have become the supreme value. over the religious tradition. So you have religious tradition now seen as an instrument of establishment of the nation state. And so we speak about Christian nationalism. The same is true in terms of Hinduism. In India, the same is true in Russia in terms of Russian Orthodoxy. This kind of marriage where then religion is in the function of national resurgence, national power, which I find personally deeply problematic, especially with universalist religions. Universalist meaning religions that equally address each human being and cannot be simply put into the service of a particular group of people. So I don't know these kinds of, that at this moment, religions are sturdy enough factors to be able to contribute to the world as we, on this issue, striving for superiority. But I think it would be absolutely important to organize, say, conferences about collaboration, political scientists and economists, psychologists, sociologists, theologians, on the phenomenon of striving for superiority. Can we imagine a world where we don't strive necessarily of being better than others? And we have voices in each of these traditions who are saying, yes, actually it would be a better world. It doesn't mean that it would economically immiserate us. To the contrary, it might be salutary for us economically. We might be able to do the same thing when it comes to politics and in other domains. I personally think that would be really fantastic. And in the present time, this debate that I have, or thesis that I'm advocating, is relatively kind of marginal. People aren't talking about it. And I think it's a huge problem that they aren't. But if you look back in the past, let's say not just Milton, so that's 17th century. Let's go a little bit into 18th century. Adam Smith has, in his theory of moral sentiments, devotes quite a bit of space arguing against striving for superiority. Cross the channel and come to France. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, another very significant thinker, philosopher, politically theoretician, hugely important. He thinks about it. Go to the 19th century. Søren Kierkegaard thinks about it. Nietzsche, in his own way, thinks about it. Max Scheler thinks. So you have thinkers who wrestle with this issue at the level of politics, at the level of economics, at the level of personal. So it's a phenomenon that encompasses domains of life. Right now, we don't have that. And I think that would be really important to do.
That is a good